So, I'd like to congratulate both teams on making it to the finals of the Insert Tournament Name, Insert Year Here tournament. Where are we at? We're at Trinity. This is 2019, so congratulations. The motion is, assuming that technology to do so exists, this House would progressively tax happiness and redistribute it. So with that, I would like to call this House to order and call upon the Prime Minister to deliver the first constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 7 minutes with 30 seconds grace. Hear, hear.
Hi everybody, my name is Ariel. I'm going to be the Prime Minister for the government on today's debate, and I would first just like to thank everybody for coming today. We're all very excited to be in the finals. So I'm just going to start with definitions, framework, an overview, and then our contentions. So first of all, the government would like to define this House as the United Nations or a hypothetical world government that can tax the citizens of the entire world. Additionally, we would like to define progressively as in stages. This means that we are going to be taxing happiness like we tax income, meaning that the people with the most happiness get taxed the most, the people with the least get taxed the least. Additionally, we would like to define happiness as joy, pleasure, and contentment, and the redistribution of this happiness means that everybody must have the bare minimum.
Take POCs.
Stop time.
Are there POCs? Are there POCs?
Point of clarification.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
What's the clarification?
Wait, so are you assuming that there is a world government that exists that doesn't, or you a world government that exists that doesn't currently exist, or are you saying it's United Nations?
We're assuming a different world government.
So
not the
Can you
not the
can you explain how it functions a little more?
Sure. Just for the sake of this, like, let's just say the sole purpose of this is to tax and redistribute this happiness.
Yes. So when you say so you're saying that there's like a baseline that everyone has, but besides for that, there could be some people with like a ton more and a
Yeah.
ton. Okay.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay, so restart time. I have 1 minute elapsed.
Okay. Okay, I'll start now. So the framework that we would like to use in this debate is utilitarianism and improving quality of life. Whichever team provides a pathway to improving the quality of life for most people should win this debate. Additionally, we would like to run the overview that everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we would also like to apply one more observation to the rest of our contentions. This observation is the law of diminishing marginal returns. What this means is that a certain quantity of something is worth more to people who have less of it. So for example, $10 is worth more to somebody who is like very poor than it is to Bill Gates, for example. So this means that a quantity of happiness is worth more to people with less happiness than it is to people with a bunch of happiness. So our first contention is about how people do not have time to pursue happiness. People who work jobs with long hours that are very stressful simply do not have time to look for the joys in life. They're too focused on working and possibly providing for their family, taking care of dependents, or just using their time in order to help others or to help themselves. But they do not have time to be happy, to be joyful, or to be content because of their stressful jobs. So the impact here, if we were to provide happiness to these people, it would improve their quality of life. This means that they would lead happier lives that were more joyful and more content. Our second contention is about money. The statement that money doesn't buy you happiness is true. However, no money can cause unhappiness. If you are desperately poor, living in awful conditions, it is extremely difficult to pursue happiness. When you are constantly trying simply to survive and you're struggling just to live, it is very, very difficult to be happy. And so this means that people who have very little money are mostly much more unhappy than people who have a lot of money. So we see here not only a wealth gap, but a huge happiness gap as well, simply because it's much more difficult to pursue happiness when you are constantly worried about money and constantly just trying to make ends meet. Whereas if you are much wealthier, it's easier to take luxurious vacations or pursue happiness in other ways. Yes.
Why do people work in the first place?
Well, people work to provide for themselves and also to like sustain themselves and their families. I would say that some people work for happiness, but many other people work just because they think society tells them to and just to get by. So the impact of our second convention here is that if we were to infuse happiness in people who do not have a lot of money, then we can help them lead better lives and again improve their quality of life. Our third contention is about extenuating circumstances, because remember this hypothetical world government. This means that we are redistributing happiness from different countries to different countries. So my happiness could go to a person in China or a different country. Yes.
Do you imagine that the similar power dynamics that are currently present at the IMF or the World Trade Organization will emerge in this intergovernmental body?
I don't think so. If the only function of this body is just to redistribute happiness, I think it's as simple as just like removing it from some people and giving it to others. I don't think that it would have like more complex functions. But so extenuating circumstances can include war zones or authoritarian states. We contend that it's extremely difficult to be happy when you've just been put in like a Uyghur Muslim camp in China, or you're living under an oppressive ruler who is like oppressing his people and essentially ensuring that they are not happy by discriminating against them or persecuting them in any way. Because that is a large function of oppressive rulers, to ensure the unhappiness of their people. Other extenuating circumstances could be abusive households or other places where people are discriminated against and cannot find happiness. So the impact here is improving quality of life, for people who would genuinely not be able to pursue happiness if not for this tax. Because if you're in the middle of the war zone, it is extremely difficult to find and pursue happiness. And so this tax would allow these people to attain happiness like no other method possibly could. Our final observation is that some people will lose happiness. However, it is worth less to them. This again relates to the law of diminishing marginal returns, because even though the people in the so-called upper classes of happiness will lose it, it will simply be worth less to them and have less of an effect. Yes.
If people are sort of happy to the point that they're complacent, at least with their lives, do you think that that might lead to people not fighting against oppressive regimes or fighting against abusive relationships?
So I actually don't think that that would be the case, simply because people can be both happy and unhappy at the same time. We're not saying that everybody is suddenly going to become extremely happy and totally content with their lives to the point where they don't even want to push back if somebody is oppressive, and they don't even want to push back if they see they're in an abusive household. We think that this happiness can occur in the smaller moments of life, and it is still extremely valuable, but it will not lead to people simply not pursuing their own justice, because people have a sense of justice that is not affected by this happiness, and they can be happy while still pursuing their own well-being. And so again, I would just like to reiterate the fact that the impacts here are huge. People are happier, there is less suicide, less depression, and people are leading better lives. So that's why you should vote for Go.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for eloquent remarks, and I would now like to call upon the Leader of the Opposition to deliver the second constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 8 minutes with 30 seconds grace. Hear, hear.
Are we ready? All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I want to do a few things in this presentation. First, I just want to start with some general observations, move through my case, and I'll move through theirs. So the first thing I want to note, that when you support a program, when you support a policy, you're condoning the general ideas that underpin it, right? This is just a pretty obvious point, but whatever you're supporting is going to have broader reverberations later on. So with that being said, I want to go into our first argument today, which is that everyone will end up with less total happiness. The absolute level of everyone's happiness in the entire world is going to go down. So why is this true? So before we can redistribute happiness, right, we presume that people actually have to go out and generate this happiness to begin with. How does this happiness get generated? It gets generated from people forming relationships, pursuing things they are passionate about, and they do this because they believe it will eventually translate into greater happiness down the line, right? At the point that people know their happiness is going to get redistributed, that decentivizes them from going out and as actively trying to do these important things. from starting a new company that's going to give them fulfillment, from forming new relationships that's going to make them happier, right? And we're going to impact that why that's important later. The second thing I want you to note, Judge, when we go into the links about talking about why less total happiness will be generated, is that not only is there this disincentivizing factor, right? There's also the fear factor, right? The problem is that you're accepting as a basic premise that happiness can be taxed. And the issue with this is that people then become worried about how happiness will be taxed in the future, right? So I'm not going to be very happy. I won't be as concerned with producing happiness if I know that later on down the line, some intergovernmental body can just strip it all away from me. Those are two reasons why people will be disincentivized from actually going out and producing happiness for themselves. So what are the impacts of this? The impacts are that even if inequality goes down, right? That is to say the happiest and the least happiest person come closer together. Everybody ends up worse off, right? Because the total amount of happiness produced goes down to begin with. Like the absolute level of poverty, happiness ends off worse, right? It's better to be in a society where happiness is in fact being produced to begin with, where there is a lot of happiness to go around, than to be even with everyone else in a world where no one's having any happiness whatsoever. So next I want to go into our second impact here, which is about the economy, and it's about tech, and it's about innovation, right? So we agree absolutely that the standards of living around you, the access to technology that you have is another factor outside of this redistribution program that will impact whether people are happy, right? That is to say that it's scientifically proven that if you can't put food on the table for your family, if you can't meet the basic medical needs of your family, you're going to be really, really unhappy. So technology, innovation, advancing scientific progress, and having a good economy and just making sure people can go and get jobs is going to have massive benefits for these people's happiness. And this is kind of considering it aside from the redistribution program, right? This is happening in the, this redistribution program is happening in the context of a larger society. So the problem is that when people are disincentivized from producing happiness for themselves, that means they're disincentivized from carrying out actions that produce happiness. For example, starting a new company, right? For example, fulfilling scientific research, right? Or fulfilling English research, right? What if I want to go to a PhD at Columbia in comparative English literature? I'm not likely going to do that because I know I won't get as much fulfillment out of it. So you see that academia, scientific progress, on net, all goes down. That means our society as a whole is worse off. Even if you buy what they're saying about, like, yes, some people need happiness, the point that you need to take away, Judge, is that they're not actually comparatively better off because on net, the amount of happiness being produced overall is going down. Secondly, our second contention today is that this fundamentally disrupts the role of the state government. This isn't just the state controlling switching means, right? It's not giving people different commodities. It's fundamentally them determining outcomes, which is a key distinction in this round. People lose agency, and that's going to be the key reason, or one of the key reasons you vote for us, right? We think that it's important to maintain the idea that we as individuals are people with control over our lives, that we are actors who can control our fate, right? And there's a massive difference between redistributing commodities and really redistributing outcomes. They're redistributing outcomes. They're deciding where you end up. We don't think that's okay because it fundamentally distorts the role between human and state, and it tells people that they don't actually have control over their fate anymore, right? No matter what they do, the state is going to be controlling their outcome, not just the means that they have, whereby they can try and achieve their Next, I want to go into our third contention, which is that this is going to lead to massive abuses of power. And that fundamentally, this is going to lead to gross violations of human rights. So we have this idea, right, that people should have rights relative to the state, that having a state with too much control is bad. I want you to take a step back and actually consider why we believe that is true. I would posit, judges, that the reason we believe that is bad is because we're always considering how can this policy fail gracefully, right? What is the worst case scenario? Can the policy I'm enacting actually fail in a way that is graceful and doesn't lead to the destruction of our entire society? So that's why excessive control is bad, right? Because if the government has tons of control and that policy doesn't fail gracefully, what you see is that there's massive human rights consequences. So why is it reasonable to predict that this is going to happen in this case? We would tell you, Judge, because this intergovernmental body is most likely going to mirror the actual power dynamics that we see in other intergovernmental bodies, right? You should presume empirically, historically, what you're seeing in the world today. What we see in the world today is when you look at institutions like the IMF, when you look at World Trade institutions, when you look at the UN, when you look at any body that's comprised of multiple governments, the people that end up rising to the top and having the most power are people with A, the biggest militaries, B, the control of key geopolitical areas such as the Middle East and control over oil, right? So what we're actually going to see is that the people who are controlling where this happiness goes are going to be a few small countries, right? Like look at the Security Council on the UN, which is one of the massive, most important apparatuses for international power, right? China and Russia have massive stakes in that body, right? So we think that what's actually going to happen is a few countries are going to use this power to benefit themselves, right? And we think that if they don't, they're going to be thrown out of office, right? Because the people who are representing their countries on these intergovernmental panels are going to be beholden to coalitions who want what they want. They have to go back and get elected, right? And people are going to try and elect whoever's going to represent their interests best. And ultimately, the countries that are going to have the most power in these bodies are the countries with the most military power. That means it's going to be distorted. You're going to see more happiness going to China. And countries with no say, third world countries that in the UN and in the status quo are stifled, are going to lose actual happiness on net. Next, let's go into some of their contentions. So the argument that we get out of them first is like, it's good that it's like some people aren't happy in our society and we should make them happier. So, okay, yes, we agree that this is true. The problem with redistributing happiness is that on net, everyone gets less happy, right? Because those same people know a few things. First, they know that if they ever, if they're unhappy and they start to get happier, they know that at some point they're going to be stripped of their happiness, that the government has control over their happiness and can take their happiness away. Secondly, they're going to be unhappy because they know they have no agency, control over themselves, because their outcomes are already predetermined and their outcomes are largely fixed, and at any moment could be predetermined and fixed to an even greater extent, right? Because you can't predict with any reasonable degree of certainty what this intergovernmental body is going to do, right? It's a fantasy body. They're making it up. It doesn't even exist. So there's a high degree of uncertainty. That means there's a high degree of uncertainty in what the programs are actually going to look like, which means that there's a high degree of uncertainty of people when they go home and they say, okay, what is my future going to look like? What are my outcomes going to look like? You take away agency from people, which makes them happier. Also, as we mentioned before, people are less incentivized to go out and do the actual actions that generate happiness in the first place. So there's no happiness to be generated in a world where you do this because people are so afraid it's going to get taken away. And they also know that A, they don't have any agency, so that their lives are basically meaningless. So there's no point in them pursuing those meaningful things that we think they would otherwise do. Now, the other argument, the second argument they make is about how there are really sad people across the world, like Uyghur China. We agree that that's true. Again, we don't think that in the practical world is actually going to get sent to those people. And the idea of total, less absolute happiness being generated also applies here as well. Next, they talk about this idea of diminishing marginal returns. And I'm going to spend the last 45 seconds talking about this. So, diminishing marginal returns is true with money, right? Because if you're really rich, chances are that money is going to be sitting in a bank account and not being spent on things. But it's not true when you're talking about literal happiness, right? Happiness is like the end product. It's utils, right? It's the end quantifiable thing. So if you take away 5 levels of happiness from me, I'm going to be less happy. And you can't, the law of diminishing marginal returns only applies with money because, again, if you have $1 billion, it's not like that dollar can buy you anything you don't already have. That's not true with happiness. Happiness always makes you happier. It's always better to be more happy than the day you were before. For all these reasons, Judge, again, looking at how this is practically going to be implemented, not just crossing our fingers and wishing naively for the best, we think you ought to vote for the opposition. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his eloquent remarks, and now I would like to call upon the Member of the Government to deliver the third constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 8 minutes, with 30 seconds grace. Hear, hear.
Is everyone ready? Okay, great. I'm Julia. I'm a member of the government, and I'd just like to start off by thanking everyone for being here. Okay, I'm going to start by going down my opponent's case, and then I'm going to go over and discuss my own case. Okay, so first I'd just like to start off with this kind of overview they have going on about how people will be less incentivized to generate happiness because they think that they're going to be losing it. So first of all, I think that it's important to note that pretty much everything that's going discussed here an analogy can be drawn to taxes, because this is pretty similar, like taxes on money. Because this is basically the same thing, but it's taxes on happiness, right? So that means that you would have to think about taxes in terms of money, disincentivizing people to make money. But that's just not what happens, because people still want to make as much money as they can, even though they're going to get taxed on it. You still end up with more money at the end of the day, even though you pay more in taxes. So here what you have is that people are still going to want to be happy because, okay, maybe you're losing a little bit of happiness, but that doesn't make sense that you would think, oh, I'm going to lose a little bit, so maybe I just won't make any at all. You still want to be as happy as you can, and this is just taking a little bit off the top, right? But you're still, if you work hard to gain more happiness, you're still going to end up at the end of the day with more happiness. And so, also they say this point about how everyone's going to be really afraid of becoming happy because one day it can just be stripped all away. So there's 2 things to note here. First of all, like I said, an analogy to taxes, people aren't going to be afraid to go make more money just because one day the government could raise taxes on them again. That's not what happens, and so you don't see the same thing happening here.
extractive governments, people haven't produced. That's the problem with extractive government. So if this is a corrupt and unstable government body, isn't it likely to assume that people won't want to produce if they know that they would be already extracted?
Well, you're assuming that it is a corrupt, non-stable body, but like we're not assuming that because that's just assuming it's something super negative, and that's not, what we're assuming. Okay, but I have a second response to that, and which is that, So I was talking about how you're not going to just stop producing happiness because you're afraid of being it all stripped away. But also, current day, you can be super happy one day, and then the next day you can be super unhappy. Let's say like you're having a great life, and then your whole house burns down, like everyone inside, that's your family dies, like your happiness is gone. That's just how life works. So maybe in this scenario, it's being taken away by somehow a higher power. Doesn't matter. It's still just how happiness works. It's not something that's like permanent that you get all the time and that you just keep for the rest of your life. And like I said, it's the same thing with money. You can have a lot of money and then you can lose all of it because you spend all of it on a gambling ring, or you spend like all of it on stocks and it just went down the next day. It's like I said, this analogy between them just proves at this point about it that everything just doesn't hold true. Okay, so my opponent's next contention is about the economy and how people aren't going to take as much risk, basically, or pursue things that would that they want to because they're afraid that like they're going to lose happiness on it. So first of all, it doesn't really make much sense. First, they give this example about like pursuing a comparative lift degree at Columbia and like how you're not going to do it because you think you're going to be less happy. But if you want to pursue it in the first place, like you obviously think that it's going to make you happy. So like this doesn't really make any sense. But also, people nowadays, like I said, you can draw this analogy to money. People start startup companies even though they know that they will probably lose money because they believe in it, right? It's not, people don't currently do things only because of happiness. They do it for all of these other factors. They think it's something that they really believe in, or it's something that they really need to do. You have all of these factors going into it. And so it's not like money is going to become the defining reason for people doing anything once you start taxing it. It's going to be the same how it was before. It's just that like now there's going to be a tax on it. Yes?
When people do things that they believe in, do you think it makes them happy or sad?
I mean, I'm sure it makes them happy, but like I was saying before, you don't, right now, you're determining, like, the thing that determines why you do things isn't like, oh, I'm doing this only because of happiness, right? And so it's not going to change in the future. It's not going to change, like, I have to do whatever I can to make as much happiness as possible. That doesn't make any sense. Like, it's going to stay the same. People say, yes, I want to pursue happiness, but they have other things that go into play. There are other factors here. Yes?
When we talk about monetary taxes, like the same argument applies, that if you tax people more, they are less incentivized to produce, right?
I mean, maybe, but like you're talking about like this massive decrease. It's not going to be like as dramatic as you're describing. That's all or my only point is. I mean, maybe there's like a little bit of disincentivization, but that like people still want to be happy, so it doesn't really make much sense. Okay, but on to my opponent's second contention about interrupting state government because you're redistributing outcomes. So there's a couple things to note here. They say that people are going to be less happy because like you're losing agency, but everyone loses agency in a society. That's like the premise of Hobbes and Locke's tree is like you lose some agency, but you gain protection. And so like that's what's going on here. There's protection for people overall. Maybe you lose some agency, but that's not the most important thing. But also they say you're redistributing outcomes because like as they say in their third contention, it's going to be like the power dynamic. It's mirroring the power dynamics of the world. But if you, in our case, we explain that like the point of taxing happiness is to make sure that everyone has this like bare minimum of happiness, right? And so you don't see this occurring that like all of this happiness is going to end up going to like China or something. First of all, it doesn't make sense that we go to China because China doesn't care about if their people are happy or not. Like they are, like we said, interning the Uyghur Muslims. They clearly don't care about their happiness, so that doesn't make sense. But also, it's about raising all these people to this bare minimum of happiness, right? And so if that's the only goal of this tax, then you don't see that like some people will be getting so much of this happiness while other people are just going to be completely left out because that's not the point of the tax. Yes.
But don't government bodies who are responding to coalitions that have to elect whoever represents their interests best, aren't those governments and those people making these decisions about distribution?
Okay, so like as we said when we were explaining this hypothetical government body, it's the only point of this government body is just to tax the happiness, right? So we have already set up the purpose of this body, which is to tax happiness for the sole purpose of helping everyone get to the bare minimum. That is its purpose. We've set that up in our definitions, and so you just don't really see this occurring, like this whole election thing, because that's not the purpose of this government body. Okay, so onto our own case. So my opponents have this response to our point about law diminishing marginal returns. They say it's only true with money. It's important to note that it's actually true with all resources. And if you're, since we're taxing happiness, you can consider it a resource, right? And so, if you're super happy, like if you go down, they say that little bit less happy, I'm still happy. I might notice a difference a little bit, but it doesn't really have an impact on like me. I'm still happy. But if you're super, super, super not happy, and then you just have a little bit of happiness, let's say like you find happiness in playing an instrument or something like that could literally change your entire outlook on life. Okay, so you see that this law of diminishing marginal returns rings true. Okay, so their response to our first contention is about how like outcomes are predetermined / fixed, which is kind of their second and third contentions. So as I was just explaining before, you don't really see this being true because we're just helping raise everyone to this minimum bar of happiness. And then I think I already responded to their point on our third contention about how the happiness won't be sent to these people in extenuating circumstances like war zones way because their point is that it won't be sent there because of this like military power have more power in this hypothetical governmental body. But as I already explained, that's not true because the only point of this body is to raise everyone's happiness to this minimum bar of happiness. And so at the end of the day, you really see that we will be helping these people who are in less happy circumstances just raise their happiness just a little bit, obviously some of my grace period. And you really see that we'll be improving their quality of life because this will be working. And at the end of the day, you don't really see that any of the impacts that my opponents were talking about, such as like less total happiness, because that's just not how people function in terms of happiness. And so for those reasons, I urge you to vote for the government. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the member of the government for her eloquent remarks, and now would like to call upon the member of the opposition to deliver the final constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 8 minutes with 30 seconds grace. Here.
Okay, is everyone ready? Then I will begin. So I want to walk through a day in the life of me in SciGov's world. So I wake up, I yawn, I stretch, I have a nice stretch. And then it's my mom's birthday, I realize, and I'm like, wait a minute, what if I made my mom breakfast, right? That's like a nice thing to do. What are the two reasons I would do that, right? I would make my mom happy, and I would make me happy for making her happy, right? Those would be the reasons I make my mom breakfast. But now all of a sudden, if I feel like the government's going to be taking away a good portion of that happiness, I'm not going to make my mom breakfast. That's just not in my best interest to do. So I leave the house. I haven't made my mom breakfast, and now she's sad. And now I'm going to work, right? And I'm at work. I'm in the lab, and I'm like, wait a minute. Why am I working with these pipettes? Yeah, I used to think being a strong woman in STEM was super, super important, but now I'm realizing it's just not. Who cares about advancements when I'm not going to be really made that happy by it? Like, I'm not going to do something that's not making me happy. Let me just leave the lab. So now I've left the lab, and I want to go out for dessert, and then I'm like, wait a minute. There's like a really good-looking brownie there, but like, why buy that brownie if it's not going to make me feel that good? So suddenly, I've heard this small local business that has a brownie and no longer is selling those brownies because people don't want that happiness. So basically, as you see, the ramifications of this go throughout the entire day, right? You're just not doing your daily actions. You're not helping the economy. You're not helping build connections with people. You're not making these advancements. You're not doing any of that because it's no longer, you feel like that happiness is going to be taken away from you. So now that you've seen what a day in that life would be, you hopefully see how terrible it is. But now I want to get into some more specific stuff. So going into this big idea, so I'll actually first go down our case and then go through SciGov's case. So our first contention is about how everyone will end up with less happiness. And so what SciGov said to this is that there's natural disasters that happen anyways, and there's other disasters that happen that take away happiness at a whim, right? And like that could happen at any time in the status quo anyways. But you don't live your daily life thinking that just continuously your happiness is being taken away from you, right? So there's a huge difference between knowing that happiness is at every single second being taken away from you and knowing that there might be a chance that some huge disaster is going to take away something from you at one point potentially. There's a huge difference there, and so you need to recognize that and see how terrible that is inside SciGov's world. So that was their main rebuttal to our first contention. So now into our second contention. Into our second contention about like the role of the state, right? So one of the important things I want to bring up about this is this idea of liberty. SciGov started their case talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty means individual liberties and individual freedoms, and a sense of privacy also comes with that. That's one of the central foundations that we live life on. How can you possibly have privacy if the government, some like national body is like reading into your mind and seeing what's going on? That is, you're losing a sense of privacy there, and that's just something that people would get really aggravated by. That would cause like this mass rebellion that could lead to really devastating effects. So people would be angry about that. Additionally, they talk about like this idea of taxes and how the government taxes people anyways with money. There is such a fundamental difference between money and happiness that side government has seemed to fail to see. First of all, taxing people about money, that's just like sort of the means to an end, right? Like you're taxing people, but you're not determining the outcome of their life. When you change the happiness level of someone's life, you're actually determining the outcome of that person's life. Whereas taxing people's like monetary funds is not changing the outcome. They can still do things that can make them more or less happy or more or less financially stable. So they need to see the difference there between money and happiness. They also say that in society, in sort of living in a society and living under a government, you already don't have total power. So like this is just sort of taking away that a little more. But you do have power in almost completely over the outcomes of your life, right? You can like determine in most ways how you want the outcomes of your life to be, how you want the outcomes of your feelings to be. But in Gov's world, you don't have say, you don't have agency over what your life ends up being. Okay, now going into our third contention, which is that this is a violation of rights. It's a massive human rights offense. So again, this goes into this idea about what I was saying earlier, that going into the minds of people is a human rights offense unto itself. And then also you're putting this much power, because this is a ton of power, to be able to determine the happiness levels of people and determine how this progressive tax ends up working. You have to understand the gravity of that power, and leaving that into the hands of just a few people is giving them way, way too much power. This is the entire world we're talking about. This is every single person's mind. If we have corrupt people on that body, and we all know that bodies always end up becoming corrupt, always, or they're inefficient, they're ineffective, they prioritize certain rights over others, it's just going to end up leading to more inequality. It's going to end up leading to certain people needing to make really radical decisions, and all that has terrible consequences. Okay, so all three of our contentions still really stand. So now I want to go into their case a bit. So their first contention is that people don't have time to pursue happiness, right? So as my partner pointed out, on net, in Gov's world, every single person's happiness goes down. And I want to elaborate on this a bit because this is a really important point. So what we're saying here is that there's just less happiness overall because people are not going to feel the need to work as hard. They're not going to feel the need to be as happy, to make steps towards being happy, because they see that the government's taking this away from them. Why try to be as happy? There's this constant fear you're living in of like, oh, the government's going to constantly be taking away my mind, like a positive mindset. So this means that there's less net happiness, which means that there's less happiness to be distributed, which means each individual person has less happiness. So this point of theirs falls about how we're going to suddenly be giving like poor people happiness, which also that like the first, second, and third contentions are basically all that, is that you're giving people who need happiness. Their second contention says you need like that poor people need to be happy. Their third says that like people in war zones and in places where there's authoritarian regimes need to be happy. All of those points fall into this idea of, oh, we need to redistribute happiness to people that don't have it. But this all falls once you recognize that people are not going to be happy if they don't have the means to get that happiness, and you need the means to get that happiness when you don't have it to pull from. Okay, so now getting to this, back to this idea of like innovation and the economy, right? So like I brought this up for a second, and I do want to go more into depth about this because there's really big impacts here. So I brought up this idea, and my partner brought up this idea about innovation and like you're not going to continue working as much, right? So what are the impacts of this? Because we said it, but we need impacts. The impacts of not trying to work as hard because you're not going to be happy from it, because again, you do things, when you feel fulfilled with your work, you're becoming happier. And like you want to be fulfilled in order to become happy, therefore you want to work to become fulfilled, to become happy. All of work basically stems out of a need to be happy. And also just they brought up this idea that, oh no, you don't work necessarily to be happy, you work just to get by in life, right? But getting by in life, you do to be happy. You wouldn't try to get by in life if not for wanting to be happy. So that point of theirs is false. So if once you understand that, you see that all work and all advancements and all progress stems from the need and the drive, the human desire for happiness and to better your life, and not only your life, but your children's lives, your grandchildren's life, everyone down the line. So therefore, all advancements basically are not going to happen. You're losing major scientific things. You're losing things in the humanities. Any advancement you're talking about, all innovation is really going to face this really massive decline. So now just crystallizing this round for a second here, on side Gov's case, they want you to think that suddenly like everyone is going to have a bit of happiness and like It's all going to basically be working out for everyone. What we've proven to you is actually that happiness goes down for every single individual. There's less advancements in society. People are not forming connections because there's no need to form human connections anymore because people do that in the status quo to be happy. All positives basically in life end up just being thrown out the window because there's no need to do that anymore, if not to find happiness. For all those reasons, we urge you to vote up on this ballot. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the member of the opposition for her eloquent remarks, and I would now like to recall upon the leader of the opposition to deliver the first non-constructive speech of the round. The dais wishes to remind you that while new warranting is not allowed, new examples most certainly are.
Thank you, and I want to thank everyone for a great debate today. So, Judge, the key reason that the government is going to lose this round is because they haven't grappled with the actual realities of, okay, how do we get from point A, where we have this happiness, to point B, where we distribute in an even and fair way. They've ignored the reality that we set forth, that this is going to be a massively corrupt and uneven process, right? Before they can give you any benefits, before they can give you the benefits of distributing to people in China, before they can give you the benefits of distributing it to people who are less happy in the United States, before they can even talk about marginal returns, et cetera, they actually have to show you that they are able to have a more equal as opposed to a less equal distribution of power. We give you warrants and reasons in our first speech why this is going to be a corrupt body. Those were never grappled with, and that means this is going to be a pretty easy off ballot. So the first thing they say is that they're not going to be corrupt because their purpose isn't to be corrupt. Okay, the UN's purpose isn't to be corrupt, it's to advance human rights. But what we see when we look at international institutions such as the IMF, such as the Security Council, they are driven by a few powers who co-opt these apparatus to advance their own interests and their own geopolitical ends. We tell you that the people who are representing countries in this body are inherently going to represent the interests of their own citizens over others. Why is this true? This went uncontested and was dropped and was funded, and so it was a fundamental truth. It's true because they have to be re-elected. It's true because they have coalitions that have to put them back into power, and if they don't do it, someone else will. People will look out for their interests, right? So that means the representatives in these bodies are going to be looking out for the interests of their countries. And the people who are going to be controlling these bodies, as we see in literally every empirical other example, is that a few countries tend to dominate. So why is this incredibly bad? So first it means that they get none of the distributionary effects that they're talking about. If inequality actually goes up, you see more happiness is going to go to places like China, like Russia, that are going to have massive states because of their military and economic power. You're not actually getting the distribution that they talk about. But even putting that aside, let's go into our other arguments about why this is incredibly bad for people on this. This really just goes into the question, this debate can be boiled down to, after putting aside the question of, first, what are the practical consequences, we then move to the second level of the debate, which is, okay, assuming that they actually are able to do this, which they've never explained why they can, and they dropped all our argumentation saying why they can't. Now let's talk about the second level of debate, which is it better or worse? Now we would tell you, as we gave like 7 reasons for, that it's actually going to lead to less happiness on that. So why is this true? First, as we said, and again it was dropped, you lose agency, right? You lose the idea that I am the person who is controlling my own outcomes in the world. At the point that you acknowledge that the government is able to actually control that, you take away people's total agency over their lives. This makes every single person in the entire world less happy. That impacts out to every single human being because they've lost this complete agency, this complete sense of I own myself, which is incredibly important. Next, Judge, let's talk about this idea of actually producing, right? So we get this argument coming out of the opposition that is like, taxes don't disincentivize people from working. So in some cases that's true, right? In cases like the United States, that's probably kind of true. But when we go back and we look through the course of history, it is not true in the case of extractive governments, such as that under Henry Crome in England, right? When you look at South Africa for the end of the 20th century, when people believe they are operating under extractive governments, for example, the farming board in South Africa, that take away all your profit even if you work really hard, people are not incentivized to actually go out and produce. We've explained in this round from the starting point why you should assume, and this went unchallenged, never really meaningfully refuted, that this is going to be a corrupt body. So at the point that you accept it's a corrupt body, which you have to, because we gave you good reasons why and they never responded to them, well then what ends up happening is you have to also accept that people know they're operating under this skewed and distorted body that's going to prioritize the interests of its most powerful members. What that means is that across the world, people are less interested in actually producing happiness for all the reasons we talked about. Happiness is the end goal. It's why we work. It's why we get up in the morning. It's why we do things. Otherwise, you're just surviving. It's like being a survivor on a desert island. It's like you're just trying to make it to the next day and life is unbearable. The reason life has meaning, the reason we actually want to get up and live for the day after is because we have happiness, because we're able to form these meaningful connections. At the point that you tell that people know and have a good, reasonable certainty that this happiness could be stripped away from them, that it could be distorted in an uneven way, people are going to be disincentivized from producing. At the point that they stop producing, the absolute total level of distribution of actual good stuff you produce goes down. We've also added, Judge, this impacts out to less innovation and less economic progress on net, on balance in general, right? So why is this true? Because if people know that there's not going to be a material benefit in their outcome, if they go out and start a startup or go get a PhD from Columbia, well then what ends up happening is they're less likely to advance science and generate all this progress that we said improves happiness independently from this debate. For all these three different reasons, you're voting for the author. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his eloquent remarks, and now I would like to recall upon the Prime Minister to deliver the final non-constructive speech of the round, and the final speech of the round, not to exceed 5 minutes with 30 seconds grace, and same warning we leveled to the Leader of the Opposition.
Okay, so everybody ready? Alright. So, judges, today I would like to make it clear to you why the government clearly wins this debate. I'm just going to first go over our best responses, then go over our contentions, and then I'm going to weigh. So, first of all, this is a very large response in this round. My partner makes this point in her speech. To what my opponents say about how you're deterred from this progress, about how you're deterred from working if you think that your happiness will be taken away from you. My partner tells you in her speech that you actually will still want to work and you will still want to attain happiness. Even if you think your happiness is going to be taken away from you, you're still going to work as hard as possible to achieve that happiness. And they tell you that money cannot be equated with happiness in this sense, but it actually can, because money and happiness are both resources. And as my own opponents tell you in their first speech, money is directly related to happiness. And so this actually can be equated, because we see that people are not deterred from starting companies, and we see that they're not deterred from working even when taxes go up. They just want to make more money. The same is going to be true for happiness. If they think that happiness is going to be taken away from them, they're just going to want to work harder to get more. They're not going to want to just give up and suddenly be depressed, because everybody in this round agrees that happiness is extremely valuable. And so people are going to do whatever they can to attain it. They're not just simply going to give up and say, oh well, a bit off the top is going to somebody else who really needs it. I might as well just stop working and live a depressed life after this. So anyway, on our second response about how this role of the state and this corruption. So we defined in our first speech that this is a hypothetical government and that this government rules over the entire world. And so I would just like to draw an example about how we don't just not have a UN because we think it's corrupt. We don't just not make laws because they think they might be broken. It's still a responsibility to institute these policies if we think that they will have a net benefit. And so it is our responsibility to institute.
What's the new point?
I think the argument that it's better to do something as opposed to nothing is new.
Okay, where was it previously stated?
I just thought of an example.
Okay, so the example is that if you do something that's better than nothing, that's the example?
Yeah.
Okay. Under consideration.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. And so now I'm just going to be going over our own contentions. I would just like to restate how this law of diminishing marginal returns actually does ring true for this. I just want to give everybody an example, a hypothetical example. If I wake up in the morning and I am extremely, extremely happy, infinitely happy, and I have 1 unit of happiness taken away from me, that difference is so much less than if I have literally 0 units of happiness and then I have 1. There is a difference between the two. The second is giving much more happiness than the first, okay? My opponents repeatedly say that it does not, the comparison, you cannot equate money with happiness, but as my partner tells you, this example proves that false, that the law of diminishing returns is true. And so, thus, we can access all of these impacts from our contentions. Because what you're going to see with this policy is actually a net benefit of happiness. Because if I take happiness from somebody who really doesn't need it and give it to somebody who really does, you're actually going to see an increase in how much that happiness matters. And you're going to see an increase in overall well-being. So, just to run through our contentions, people don't have time to pursue happiness, people don't have the money to pursue happiness, and many people are in extenuating circumstances when they cannot pursue happiness. Through instituting this policy, we will actually be giving people the ability to be happy, which is an amazing gift. So our impacts here are that if you are happy, suicide rates will go down, there will be less depression, and you're also more likely to rise up and better yourself if you have hope and if you can be happy. So just returning to our framework, which was is about utilitarianism and quality of life for everybody, just a decrease in the suicide rate is huge for this. Because remember, this is saving lives. This is not just saving happiness, but suicide rates are actually saving lives as well. So finally, to weigh this round, if you want a pathway to happiness, which my own opponents call the derivation of all advancements, like all advancements are derived from happiness, you should vote for the government. We are the ones who give you a clear way to achieve more happiness for more people. Because as I've said before, this will lead to a net benefit for people. Additionally, just to restate the law of diminishing marginal returns, because of this, we will see a benefit and an increase for happiness for all people. And also, this point about how the total happiness will go down is simply not true. As I said earlier in this speech, people will not be deterred enough to simply just want to lead a depressed life. So what you're going to be weighing here is a net benefit of happiness, a decrease in the suicide rate, a decrease in depression, versus just the status quo, where people are already super unhappy. And so, sorry, I'll be using a little of the grace period. And so if you want a world where people are better off and where there's better quality of life, the way that you should vote is for the government.
I would like to ask everyone to leave.